are going to bring that voice to the table, and I think it's a really important thing that we need to do. And with this session, what we'd like to do is 3 different things. First of all is to bring that voice to these conversations, because it's just so important. I mean, we're talking about most of the world's jobs, right? And a significant proportion of the world's food. And yet when trade is discussed, when we set agreements on things like agriculture, those voices just aren't there. So that's the first thing that we want to do. And in order to help us with that, we have, I'm really pleased and privileged that we have Jane Nalunga with us from Uganda. She's the director of, it's a long acronym, so I hope I'm going to get it right, the Southern and Eastern African Trade, Information and Negotiations Institute. We've worked with them over many, many years, and they, for expertise in this area, you can do no better than talk to Jane and her colleague Herbert, who I think is still behind me. I'm also really pleased to welcome Josephine Atanga from the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I get the A's mixed up sometimes. They are the continental network of small-scale producers focusing on agroecology and on promoting this as the sustainable future for agriculture. So very pleased to welcome Jane. So we're going to hear first from Jane and Josephine, and then I'm going to hand over to colleagues from the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, Sophia Murphy, and then also Lisa Bergi from the University of Bern, because and what they're going to talk to us about is a proposal for a reimagined agreement on agriculture. But the final thing that we need to do today in this room, and we're all about participation and inclusivity, we need all of you. We need all of your voices. We need your thoughts. We really want your feedback on this proposal. What do you think? Is this doing what it should to help small producers? And Jane and Josephine are going to start by giving us their thoughts. We'll also have some quick reflections from other people who participated. So from IISD, Facundo, who's to my right, and also Natalie, who is somewhere in the room. Yeah. Oh, who has left the room? But maybe she'll come back, we hope. The last thing I want to say is, I know there are lots of people in the room. Je sais qu'il y a des gens dans la chambre pour qui le français est beaucoup plus facile pour ce genre de discours. Donc on aimerait beaucoup essayer de faciliter ça. Donc si vous préférez parler en français, si on peut vous aider à mieux participer, dites-le nous, on va essayer de traduire un peu entre moi et Sophia, et peut-être Joséphine aussi, on va pouvoir essayer de faciliter ça un peu. Donc n'hésitez pas à lever la main et nous indiquer que le français ce serait mieux. Oui, okay. I wonder, yes, I wonder because mais pour sûr, pendant in the Q&A, pendant les conversations, on va essayer de faciliter au maximum. Peut-être pour les présentations, ça va être un peu long. Okay. So Jane, can I invite you to start the conversation, please? And please use the mic.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Okay, I would like to thank IISD for organizing all this and for bringing us together to talk about this very, very important issue. And as Bruce has pointed out, to bring the voices of the small-scale farmers at least on the table. We might not be the right people to talk on behalf of the small-scale producers, me and Josephine, but we will try. I will look at, first of all, the importance of small-scale producers when it comes to international trade, especially also, and the role they can play in the reimagined agreement on agriculture. I also look at the challenges they are facing, and also provide some proposals on the opportunities which we see in the global trade. This is just to remind ourselves of the central role of small-scale producers in Africa. I'm going to talk about Africa, small-scale producers in Africa. Agriculture is the backbone of our economy in Africa, and it provides almost more than 60% of our GDP. And that agriculture is subsistence mainly, almost 70% of our agriculture, and in some countries 80% of our agriculture is subsistence, meaning that it's small scale farming by small scale producers, and most of them are women. Women are in production, although men are in marketing. Men market, women produce. That's also an imbalance there in agriculture. Women, the whole issue around small-scale agriculture is important because of not only contribution to the economy, but also contribution to food security and food sovereignty. Josephine will talk about that. Household incomes and also national incomes, but also they have contributed to climate resilience and also protection of the biodiversity. In a way, small-scale farmers are also the custodians of seeds, but I will leave that to Josephine talk about agroecology and the whole issues around seeds. The challenges facing small-scale production and agriculture in general in Africa. As you know, agriculture in Africa, Africa exports raw commodities like cotton, coffee, tea. In fact, most of the countries, you talk about Ghana, what comes to mind? Cocoa. You talk about Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire. You know, it's just one or two products. That's our agriculture, you know. And we import largely manufactured goods, which has led to a trade deficit because our raw commodities are cheaper, the prices are volatile, and the value-added products are more expensive. So we are always running a trade deficit in Africa. But again, what I wanted to emphasize around that is that it's an unfair exchange, you know, and that unfair exchange is at the bottom of the so many problems we are finding as a continent. The debt crisis, the balance of payment problems, it's because of that unfair exchange. So what are the challenges facing agriculture, facing small-scale producers? Because the two are one and the same. The challenges which small-scale producers face also spill over into the agriculture sector. I would divide the challenges faced by the agriculture sector in Africa at two levels. There are those challenges which are internal, which are as a result of the policies which our governments are following, but most of these policies are also imposed from outside. I'll give an example of the structured adjustment programs. Under the IMF, International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, many African countries were told to liberalize, to open up their economies, to privatize, and to deregulate, to leave development to the private sector. And we have seen government's role in supporting agriculture, in supporting small-scale producers being reduced completely. So we have seen challenges where small-scale farmers face challenges of inputs like fertilizers, which are so expensive. And recently, because of the war, the Iran war, the fertilizers have gone really, really up because government is no longer subsidizing fertilizers. So there are those challenges which are there because of government policies. But I would like to talk about the challenges coming out of the global trading system. Today we are here talking about this issue. On the other side of town, negotiations are going on, WTO negotiations, as you know. There is a ministerial conference. And one of the issues on the table is the agreement on agriculture. And for us as Africa, we are expecting that there should be issues which, 2 minutes, okay. There are issues which have to be addressed when it comes to the agreement on agriculture. One is the issue of subsidies. The subsidies which developed countries are providing must be disciplined, because these are subsidies which lead to the influx of subsidized products on our markets. I have seen here milk from Europe. There is the cotton issue. There are issues around tomatoes. Yet, in the agreement on agriculture, developing countries are not given a leeway, or there is no provision to support, to protect their agriculture. In fact, that's why when you hear African countries talking about a special safeguard mechanism, it means they want that mechanism to support, to be able to limit the influx of those products. So those are some of the issues which at the WTO. But lastly, there is also the issue of the reform of the WTO. African countries have been requesting that the WTO should be reformed. But the reform was about ensuring that the imbalances and asymmetries in the WTO agreements are addressed. One of them is the example I have given. Developed countries subsidize heavily. They dump their products on our market. We have no protection. So developing countries want those asymmetries, and there are many more. They want those asymmetries addressed. But the reform is taking another direction, which I won't talk about. Lastly, I think what's really important, if we are talking about small-scale producers, we are talking about global trade, we are talking about the WTO, the issue of development has to be at the center of all these negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. What a fantastic overview. And the things that I picked out that don't often get mentioned are the gender dimension, so important, and so often overlooked in the conversation. Also, it feels like an old issue, but that issue of the raw materials curse, what we used to talk about as the raw materials curse, so not being able to move up in the value chain, and of unfair exchange, as well as the historical asymmetries at the WTO. So a really kind of rich disposition of what we're here to talk about today. So Joséphine is going to go next. Joséphine is going to present in French. Joséphine va présenter en français. I can see colleagues in the audience who can speak French and English. If you can only speak in English and you're not going to understand, put your hand up and maybe some of our francophone colleagues could help with a little bit of translation. So I just give 1 minute for that to happen. I feel like there's some people. Is everyone okay? Everyone's okay. Your last opportunity before I hand over to Joséphine. Joséphine, please.
Bonjour à tous. Bonjour à tous et merci à l'ISD de nous avoir permis de venir ici avec la voix de la société civile africaine et particulièrement des paysans. Nous sommes l'Alliance africaine pour la souveraineté alimentaire en Afrique, AFSA. Peut-être pour beaucoup d'entre vous, vous ne la connaissez pas. C'est une alliance qui est la voix la plus importante de la société civile en Afrique parce que nous rassemblons des membres dans plus de 50 pays en Afrique et la majorité de nos membres sont des paysans et donc moi-même je fais partie dans mes temps perdus et surtout le week-end. Cependant, je vis avec les paysans au quotidien puisque je travaille en tant qu'encadreur, en tant que soutien et aussi en tant qu'agent de plaidoyer. Et mes parents sont paysans et moi-même je vis en milieu rural. Donc j'ai mon champ à côté de chez moi, je pratique l'agroécologie dès que je rentre de mon bureau qui est basé à Yaoundé. Donc l'agroécologie au quotidien, je mange les fruits de mon champ et cela me permet aussi de savoir de quoi je parle. Alors, parler des petits producteurs et du commerce international, quel rôle pour un accord sur l'agriculture réimaginée? Pour nous, c'est très important parce qu'il s'agit là d'une question cruciale. C'est la question du travail qui nous permet en tant que paysans de vivre et donc de dépasser l'espace de la survie. Parce que c'est le commerce qui fait le lien entre le travail et le revenu pour nous, petits producteurs. C'est ça en fait pour nous. Et au niveau de l'Alliance africaine pour la souveraineté alimentaire, nous avons 6 piliers qui sont importants à travers lesquels nous travaillons pour promouvoir l'agroécologie, pour promouvoir la souveraineté alimentaire. C'est important pour moi de présenter d'abord qui nous sommes pour savoir pourquoi est-ce que nous menons ces batailles. Alors, nous avons ces 6 piliers-là qui sont générer des connaissances parce que l'agroécologie étant un ensemble de pratiques, on a parfois l'impression que c'est juste la duplication des pratiques naturelles. Non. Il y a une dimension scientifique dans l'agroécologie et c'est cette dimension scientifique-là que nous promouvons à travers le pilier sur la gestion des connaissances, à savoir de pouvoir prouver que les savoir-faire que nous promouvons en matière d'agroécologie sont des savoirs scientifiquement démontrables. Le deuxième pilier, c'est la promotion des politiques favorables à l'agroécologie. L'agroécologie étant aussi un mouvement, il est important que nous promouvions des politiques qui permettent de créer un environnement qui favorise la souveraineté de ceux qui pratiquent cette agriculture-là. C'est pourquoi nous faisons du plaidoyer du niveau local avec nous, les paysans, au niveau national en adressant nos préoccupations au ministère, aux différents ministères et aussi en touchant l'Union africaine et tous les espaces qui sont des espaces ouverts où nous pouvons porter notre voix. Et dans le cadre d'une matière comme le commerce, justement, cette conférence est une conférence importante. C'est pour ça que nous avons accepté l'invitation de l'ISD parce que nous avons un modèle à réimaginer que nous proposons en termes de en termes de réglementation commerciale, parce que nous souffrons de la réglementation à l'heure actuelle. Nous avons aussi comme pilier la construction du mouvement. Nous pensons que nous devons travailler ensemble pour pouvoir adresser. Vous savez que l'élaboration des réglementations actuelles en matière de commerce sont des réglementations qui sont menées par les entreprises les plus puissantes, que ce soit dans le domaine agroalimentaire ou dans d'autres domaines, et des nations qui sont les plus puissantes. Donc pour nous, il est important d'avoir un mouvement suffisamment puissant pour pouvoir mener, et ceci se fait à travers des communications et aussi des narratifs qui permettent d'apporter un changement dans ce qu'on pense en termes de connaissance des concepts. C'est quoi la liberté? C'est quoi la souveraineté? C'est quoi le commerce? C'est quoi l'aliment? Quand on parle par exemple de l'aliment, est-ce que c'est juste une commodité, juste pour se nourrir, juste pour avoir de l'énergie? Non. Il ne s'agit pas seulement pour l'aliment de se nourrir. L'aliment a une dimension spirituelle. Il y a une dimension spirituelle, une dimension culturelle dans l'alimentation. Il y a une dimension de dignité dans l'alimentation. Dans ma tradition, on dit, celui qui détient ton ventre, celui-là détient ton cerveau, il détient ton action. Et tant que nous ne serons pas souverains en matière alimentaire, dans tout ce qui concerne, dans tous les pays en Afrique, nous ne pourrons pas décider de ce que nous faisons, nous ne pouvons pas décider de nos actions. Notre sixième axe, c'est celui de développer des pratiques agroécologiques, et le sixième axe, c'est celui de favoriser des réseaux dynamiques. Je ne vais pas revenir sur les concepts de base que j'avais prévus, notamment l'agroécologie, les droits humains qui sont importants parce que j'ai évoqué l'aspect des dignités, de la dignité. L'alimentation est une question de dignité, une question de droits humains, donc ne peut pas se discuter juste en termes de réglementation, d'ouverture de marché de manière sauvage, et ne peut pas se discuter sans la prise en compte des minorités telles que les femmes, les autochtones, les indigènes et tous ceux qui n'ont pas la force économique ou financière d'imposer leur volonté. Alors, quels sont les impacts des accords commerciaux sur nous? Nous avons, en termes d'action, par exemple, cette ouverture sauvage des marchés. Il y a certes quelques éléments qui parlent de contrôle, mais il y a une ouverture sauvage des marchés qui a pour conséquence sur nous en tant que paysans une concurrence déloyale. Imaginez qu'il y ait des paysans sur d'autres continents qui reçoivent facilement des financements agricoles, qui reçoivent facilement des engrais, et que sur le continent africain, ces commerçants, ces paysans, nous, on ne reçoit pas autant d'appui, on n'a pas autant de facilités, que ce soit des facilités financières ou que ce soit des facilités en termes d'environnement, en termes d'infrastructure, et qu'on se retrouve sur le même marché. Et maintenant, nous avons la ZLECAf qui a adopté le même processus que l'OMC, à savoir si un produit se retrouve déjà sur votre marché, il n'y a plus à avoir de protection pour le produit. Il suffit juste que le produit soit entré sur le marché. Vous êtes tous sur le même pied d'égalité. Alors que le produit n'a pas bénéficié, le produit local n'a pas bénéficié du même accompagnement pour se retrouver sur le marché. Voilà des difficultés auxquelles nous faisons face. On a la liberté de distribution disproportionnée des bénéfices, étant donné que sur le marché local, nos produits se retrouvent à des coûts plus élevés. Je vous prends le cas du Cameroun. Nous produisons un riz local qu'on appelle le ndop. C'est un riz, je vous dis, naturellement parfumé. Il est parfait. Mais comment est-ce qu'un Camerounais qui gagne 46 000 francs de salaire peut acheter un riz local qui vaut 2 000 francs le kilo? Alors que nous avons le riz qui vient de l'Inde qui coûte 400 francs sur le même marché. Donc nous avons là un challenge qui est très important. Nous avons notre tomate locale par exemple aussi qui, lorsque vous arrivez sur le marché, à l'heure actuelle, le cajot de tomate coûte 2500 francs. Et c'est totalement en défaveur pour le paysan, pour celui qui produit. Donc, c'est un vécu qui est un ressentiment très douloureux pour les producteurs. Donc, nous avons cette ouverture sauvage des marchés. Elle a aussi dit en anglais. Nous parlons aussi de l'harmonisation des normes. Le paysan, à l'heure actuelle, n'est pas suffisamment encadré, n'a pas les moyens d'adresser toute la certification nécessaire qui est un élément fondamental pour entrer dans le marché international. Nous nous contentons donc de tourner au niveau local et d'avoir tous nos produits, que ce soit nos produits locaux, traditionnels, qui ne sont même pas acceptés sur les marchés internationaux. Je vous parle par exemple de notre bâton de manioc au niveau du Cameroun, qui s'appelle aussi la chikwang. Si vous voulez exporter officiellement la chikwang, vous n'avez pas une norme connue de commercialisation de la chikwang. C'est un problème. Nous avons des investissements étrangers qui actuellement s'installent. Voilà un autre problème sur la question de souveraineté. S'agit-il d'une question de géographie? Être positionné au Cameroun suffit-il à être un produit alimentaire camerounais? Lorsque les Chinois viennent et s'emparent, je n'ai rien contre les Chinois. Lorsque des investisseurs viennent et implantent leur plantation de riz sur des dizaines de milliers d'hectares au Cameroun, s'agit-il du riz camerounais? Non, je ne le pense pas. C'est pour ça qu'on parle d'une question de souveraineté. La souveraineté est certes le pouvoir de se nourrir, mais c'est le pouvoir aussi de se nourrir par soi-même et de pouvoir en vivre. Donc, il y a un certain nombre de solutions qui ont aussi été évoquées par ma collègue, notamment avoir aussi dans les éléments des accords, des éléments de protection, des éléments d'accompagnement, la reconnaissance des labels locaux, la reconnaissance des pratiques agroécologiques, la défense des droits fonciers communautaires et aussi la promotion de l'agroécologie en tant qu'une pratique reconnue dans les domaines politiques. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. I think we could hear the passion in the room there, so thank you so much for that. And I think that you really make a strong case for that need for an enabling policy environment for small-scale farming and also for agroecology, and really brought home the imbalance between small-scale producers and multinational corporations. And I think the thing that I really took from it is, you know, trade has to serve us, has to serve small-scale producers, not the other way around. So thank you so much to both of our speakers. I'm going to briefly open up for any questions or comments or thoughts from the audience. So if you have any specific questions for Jane or Josephine, please put your hand up. I'm trying not to start with the white bloke in the room, I'm sorry. But I have a point from a colleague here, two here, and one at the back, and I'll come back round again. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm called Charles Joel, a student at the International Relations Institute of Cameroon, specializing in international trade and economic diplomacy. So this really concerns us. We're going up the chain to be the next ones to sit on this table tomorrow. It's really a privilege. We say thank you for the organizers. I just have 4 points to bring up that actually affects the grassroots farmers or producers. Price fluctuations. For example, recently, the cocoa price left from about 4,000 in Cameroon to now it's 800 francs. What mechanism can we put in place to actually protect these farmers, those in the grassroots, those actually doing the work? What mechanism to protect them from that sort of drastic price fluctuation? Secondly, there's a problem of financing. Like, it's a serious problem. If you actually go down to the grassroots, you'll be able to testify. These farmers, they go through a lot, no financing, nothing at all. And at the end, they are the price takers. So it's something to really look into. Then technical know-how. Like, can there a policy be implemented, for example, for technical or technological transfer from those who know from those who don't. Like, can there be an agreement saying if we are driving towards industrialization, as we say, can there be an agreement saying before a product leaves, it should be transformed to this level? And why the transformation is being done, it should not be done just by the experts that have been brought in, but there should be a way to train the locals so that after some period they can start doing it by themselves. I think it will be more sustainable in that way. Then I think we should start talking about moving up the global value chain. We should not remain just exporters of raw materials. What can we do to really help these local farmers to move up the global value chain, not just exporting the raw materials, but also, if not fully transforming them, but even at the level that would take them up the value chain. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Ngale Hubert, Ngale Makia. I'm a farmer, small-scale farmer based in Cameroon. Some of the problems he just highlighted are day-to-day realities. My question would be to Madam Jane or to Madam Josephine, anyone can answer. It's a question where we produce in Africa and we don't produce enough, and we have NGOs or donors who help us subvent when we have this lack or drought or cannot produce enough. But they tend to buy from foreign partners rather than buying from the sourcing from Africa, because while Kenya could be suffering drought, while Cameroon could be having an excess. So buying from Cameroon sometime, or buying from Nigeria or from some other parts of the globe or on the continent, could mean transferring funds from one side of the continent to the other side, rather than buying from China or from Venezuela or some part of the globe. So is there any kind of mechanism to stop that happening, or like we said in the last thing, looking at source of origin for the goods to be given to the farmers? The last question will be in terms of the alliance, in terms of food subsidy in Africa. In Europe, we have food banks where the Europeans, they produce, well, Europe is advanced, but they produce and they keep in food banks. And in terms of droughts or in terms of when they need, they can call the food banks. How far are we in terms of having food banks across the continent in such a way that we can produce in excess, so, save that excess, and when we need, because we are always in need of that excess, we can now go without looking into the international market? Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for the panelists who just present. It was so brilliant. I'm Gantan Rodi, a student from the International Relations Institute of Cameroon, within the WTO chair hosted by Eric, that's the school. He's just as my course mate. My question goes to whoever can attempt to answer to it. So I'll focus more on the WTO agreement related to agriculture. So we have this issue of food security, where state hold public stock for food security aim. So I wish to know how the WTO tackle this issue, because it's a big problem within that concern the multilateral trading system. So equally concerning local transformation and investment procedure, like we have these trade-related measures on investment, which how can I put it? Let me say, like prohibits local content. So how do the WTO wants to foster African development or increase African participation into regional or global value chain without like promoting the incorporation of Africa, let me say, local company into global value chain? Let me take, for instance, global content. If maybe they produce a phone, maybe they import a phone from, maybe, I don't know, Canada or maybe any country. This, it is, we like encourage, let me say, Cameroon firms like to put their content, I don't know, maybe participate in the production of that phone in any way. So this will at least post Cameroon or any African country or developing country into boost, maybe put them into the global value chain. So, but these trade related measures in investment prohibit this local content, and I'll equally talk on the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. So, pardon? Okay, well, knowing this, the last intervention. So I don't know how we talk of transfer of technology. How do we transfer technology while protecting, let me say, rights, or maybe putting what you call brevet or property on created things. So for me, we need to look on this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. And I mean, there's so much knowledge in the room. I think you can tell from the questions, so it's great. So I'm going to hand back to Josephine and Jane for some answers, and I'll do one last round of questions after that. So I'll come back in a second.
The first question was from Charles about what is happening with cocoa, for example, how to protect our farmers, how to price fluctuations. Something that is missing also here in our countries is the insurance. We don't have those structures. We don't have policies that could help our farmers when times comes in the global market to have some issues like and challenges to be protected. I think something that is important for us is to be conscious of our situations, that we are weak as government, for our governments, that we are not at the same level with other countries, and take measures that are adapted to our own local situations. And also we have the Kampala Declaration, that is the third sequence of this agriculture declaration, with 10% that should be engaged in agriculture. We need also to advocate for our governments to respect that commitment, because now none of the countries has respect that. So when there's first, we need to know that we are not at the same level with others as governments. For the governments, when they are going to sign all those agreements, they need to know they cannot just sign because it's a matter of freedom, and also matter of, they are sometimes talking about this the free market. No, for us, we cannot sign things just because all the countries in the world are signing, because we are not at the same level. Our continent is, for the moment, we are back, and we have to take some measures. You know, in after the Second World War, they have Plan Marshall. We have not yet had something like that in Africa, but Africa has suffered a lot. So we need specific measures that could address situations in the markets. You talked also about maybe it's about, we have also a question about transformation. It's all about that. We need good policies. Without policies, because the politicians are the ones who could push things, and us as civil societies, as farmers, we are there to help them to open their eyes. You talked also about maybe the second one is I don't know, the farmers also, my colleague, about producing enough, and asking us to produce enough, and also about food banks. My reference is maybe about what happens during COVID-19. In Cameroon, we was not able to go and stay at home, even while they was talking about if you go out, you will die. We needed to go out because we didn't have food. and no one have something to give us. It's why we was out during COVID-19. If you told somebody, if you go out, you are going to die, you are going to be sick, no. We had nothing to eat, we had no support, we didn't have a bank, food banks anywhere to support us. We didn't even have money to support people. So that is also a matter of policies, and also for us as communities to think about how as communities we can strengthen solutions, some solutions that we came out during the COVID-19. And the last one, maybe I'll leave that one to you.
Thank you so much for those questions and comments. One, on the issue of cocoa and the price volatility and how to support farmers. I think the whole issue is about value addition. The prices of raw commodities are always going up and down. We need to add value. But the challenge is that when you add value, you take cocoa, zero tariff, you make chocolate or cocoa powder, the tariff go up. That issue has been on the agenda. The issue of tariff escalation has been on the agenda for a long time. And unless we address it, we are going to have this problem. But I think we also need to look at the continental free trade area, because we can be able to trade cocoa powder and chocolate internally. Two, on the issue of food aid, you raised the issue of food aid. This is an issue which has been on the WTO agenda for negotiations for a long time. And developing countries have been saying, let the World Food Program buy locally. If one community has maize, another doesn't have, let them buy locally. But it's an issue on the table. The issue of public stock holding for food security, where governments buy food and provide to citizens when there is no food. Again, that issue is on the agenda for discussion. But I think it's also the issue of public stock holding is an issue of policy. Our governments, there is policy space for them to be able to buy. Some governments don't do it. But like I'm saying, the issue of public stock holding for food security is on the agenda for negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have 4 more questions. I'm going to ask you to keep them really short because we have a whole part 2 to get to. Okay, I did promise, yeah. So I think I had the lady in the green, lady in the red, and 2 at the end here. Yeah, so please.
My name is promoter of Nuance Company. Ma question va à l'endroit de Joséphine Atangana. Madame, tout à l'heure, j'étais un peu intriguée parce que vous avez parlé, en parlant de l'aliment, vous avez parlé de la dimension spirituelle de l'aliment. J'étais un peu intriguée et j'aimerais que vous m'éclairez un peu lorsque vous parlez de la dimension spirituelle de l'aliment. J'aimerais mieux comprendre, s'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I think you had a question.
Thank you very much. I'm Hildegunn Gjengdal and I represent the Norwegian farmers. And the Norwegian farmers are receiving subsidies, and quite a lot of subsidies, but we produce mainly for the national market. And I think that we have to find rules that makes a difference between supporting products that are consumed nationally and for food security also in Norway or other countries, and the kind of support that is disturbing other markets in other parts of the world. And I'm not talking about export subsidies because that's cut out now, but that kind of support that we would need to have our farmers. We produce only 40% of what we use. And if we stop producing, I think we would import from bigger and more efficient farmers in Europe. And I don't think that would help anyway. So find solutions where you can support national products or products for the national market, and other rules for the exported that could disturb other markets. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nadine, and then I'll go to you next. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Je m'appelle Annie Lorazan, je suis étudiante en doctorat à l'Université de Douala. Ma question va vers Joséphine Atangana concernant la fonction de plaidoyer de l'Alliance. Ma question concerne les mesures sanitaires et phytosanitaires. J'aimerais savoir si dans le cadre de vos plaidoyers, vous réussissez à convaincre les institutions sur les questions de subventions aux agriculteurs concernant la protection de leur production, comment veux-je dire, l'adéquation de leur production aux règles sanitaires et phytosanitaires nationales et internationales. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais enchaîner. Je suis Florence Épée, également doctorante à l'Université de Douala. J'aimerais qu'on aborde le sujet de la diversité agricole, parce qu'on se rend compte que nos marchés, les petits producteurs, s'orientent toujours vers de la spécialisation agricole héritée un peu de la colonisation. Or, les habitudes alimentaires changent, les consommateurs sont à la recherche d'une alimentation beaucoup plus variée. Est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas orienter les petits producteurs vers des productions un peu plus variées, notamment différentes variétés de tomates, différentes variétés de patates douces, exemple, et pour pouvoir conquérir d'autres marchés comme en Asie? Parce que lorsqu'on a la chance de voyager et d'aller vers des marchés européens, on se rend compte que dans leurs supermarchés, ils ont énormément de produits. Merci.
Thank you so much. And Jane and Josephine, if I could ask you to also keep fairly short responses, and then we'll hand over to Sophia.
Maybe maybe we'll have a bilateral. We'll have a bilateral.
Yes, so I consider it's also like a comment, a proposition. Yes, thank you. Et là, il y a deux questions qui concernent le plaidoyer. Qu'est-ce que nous faisons en termes de plaidoyer, notamment pour ce qui concerne les aspects phytosanitaires? Alors, AFSA travaille actuellement à la promotion de la transition agroécologique. Et donc, c'est tout un package qui adresse même les questions des semences. Donc, il y a la question semencière. Vous ne pouvez pas être souverain sur les questions alimentaires si même votre système semencier n'est pas souverain. Donc, et les questions d'engrais aussi, nous travaillons là-dessus. Nous avons des programmes entiers là-dessus. Et nous avons aussi des programmes sur les pratiques agroécologiques. Donc, nous poussons nos membres actuellement à faire des propositions sur les stratégies nationales agroécologiques. Donc, pour ce qui concerne, je vais prendre un cas qui est un cas d'école aussi. En même temps, ils ont avancé, mais ils ont aussi reculé. C'est le cas du Sénégal. Au Sénégal, à l'heure actuelle, le gouvernement apporte quand même quelques subventions en termes d'engrais agroécologiques, de fertilisants agroécologiques. Donc ça, c'est un exemple que nous partageons aussi. Il y a des gouvernements qui peuvent aussi le faire. Donc, travailler sur les stratégies, les politiques agroécologiques à adopter. Le gouvernement du Cameroun est déjà aussi sur le chemin. En décembre, le président de la République du Cameroun a signé la loi sur l'agriculture organique, ce qui est déjà aussi une avancée pour ce qui concerne l'agroécologie. L'organique est un peu plus sévère, mais c'est déjà quand même... au Cameroun aussi, il y a, et ça va aussi dans le sens de la deuxième question, un programme qui travaille sur la promotion de la consommation locale. AFSA mène une campagne au niveau africain qui s'appelle My Food is African. Peut-être vous pouvez voir sur mon My Food is African, et ça se décline dans les différents pays. Encourager les consommateurs à réclamer une nourriture saine. Donc nous travaillons aussi sur ces aspects-là. Et en même temps, sur les consommateurs, les producteurs, nous-mêmes, parce que même nous, les producteurs, nous devons changer notre façon de faire. Et c'est aussi notre travail dans le cadre de AFSA. Merci.
Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Sophia and Lisa.
Thanks so much, Ruth. Thanks, Josephine and Jane and everyone in the room. Merci à tout le monde. So we'll just talk now, I'm just really going to circle around and talk about very many of these same issues. How is it that you can structure trade and recognize these different kinds of issues that have come up in the discussion already? And I'm just going to take 2 minutes, I hope, 3 minutes, to say something about how we came to the project. And then Elizabeth next to me will describe the treaty that we've come up with. So this is the culmination of almost 3 years' work of an experiment, a thought experiment around what kind of trade rules would we like if we were able to start with new principles and with new ambition for the trade in agriculture. I wanted to say one thing about the agreement on agriculture itself at the WTO that gets forgotten maybe, but now that I have my gray hair, I can say and remember it was a breakthrough at the time, and a lot of Global South countries really welcomed it. They were very quick to change their mind, but at the time, agriculture was a selling point in a whole package of things that many governments did not fully understand as they recognized themselves, and that were pushing a lot of more aggressive expansion of trade from services sector, pharmaceuticals and so on. That's been an ongoing problem all the time for the trade system, the pushing ahead and the pulling back. But at the time, agriculture was meant to be providing a more level playing field, and then there were organizations like ours saying that it failed. But I would say a second thing is that food security was always a shadow on the agreement, and at the time this Marrakesh decision came forward at the last minute to appease some countries like small island developing states who said we are huge net importers and you're proposing actively to raise prices and it's going to hurt us. And we had lots of discussion at the time. Bread box, rice box became the development box, eventually became some of these measures that Jane has referred to, an agenda that, among others, the United States refuses to discuss. But it was about recognizing this tension that Norway's always so, sorry, not to call you Norway, but the Norwegian farmer was also getting at, that there are different reasons in different markets for food, and yet the WTO is very totalizing. There's just one set of rules for all. There were revisions built in that never really happened. Developed countries made promises that they never kept. And over time now, we have a very different world, a different, much larger population, a great deal more production and consumption in the Global South, a lesser importance of markets as producers and consumers, so countries like the United States. None of that is really reflected very well in rules that have failed to evolve. Finally, we have a really much enriched idea of what food security is, and it includes all the work on food sovereignty. But I think that the discussion back and forth between these concepts and understanding what they are has given us really rich international agreement on an understanding of food security rooted in protecting the environment that we're busy destroying, understanding the livelihoods issues that small-scale producers are confronting every day, farm workers as well. And we draw on that, as Lisa will explain. I feel the trade system kind of stayed stuck, but our understanding of what food systems could be has really grown to something quite exciting and promising for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sophia, and thank you all for being here. It's great to have you in the room and to have the discussion afterwards. I really look forward, and thank you to the hosts to make that possible and to root for, and for you putting the major issues on the table. So one word again on our project. It's called Agreement on Agriculture Reimagine. So everybody's reimagining now. So we formulated that title before Trump was in power. So just that to understand. And as why did we? A big group of people. So next slide, please. So yeah. So I'm professor in law and sustainability at the University of Bern, but I'm co-leading a project together with Sophia Murphy and Caroline Domen. Sophia is from the United States and Caroline from Geneva. But in the group we have people from Argentina, like Facundo here, from Zimbabwe, we have Jane in the group, we have someone from China, from India, etc. We were all people, we have agroecologists, we have lawyers, etc. We have people, these are all people that were thinking about sustainable food systems and trade in agriculture for a while, and you knew that the current system is squeezed, the current agreement on agriculture does not come with the responses we need. And so we were thinking, if we imagine starting from scratch, I know that's a bit dangerous right now, but if we imagined, and if we imagine a world which takes sustainable development really seriously and which takes human rights and equitable and fair trade relations really seriously, how would that look like? So if we took a step back, if we would even think of other underlying principles, how would that look like? And at the moment, so we have discussed during 2 years, we came up with this draft treaty. I have some copies here, we will circulate them afterwards and some summaries. You might read them afterwards, but we are interested in your visions as well. And we put that, we offer this as an inspiration. We're not naive, we don't think it will replace the current agreement on agriculture, but we hope it will inspire the debate. So, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So first, we did an analysis of exactly what Sophia right now said. What's the problem with the current regime, which is unfair, squeezed, patchwork agreement, which never got to an end. But you can here, if you are interested, take the picture of this QR code and read through that. It's a background paper. So we'll not go very much into that. Next slide, please. And based on that understanding, we did hackathons and thinking through, etc., and came exactly up with that treaty. What is in the treaty? How did we, next slide. Yeah, it's very small. There's another QR code where you can access the treaty online on the left-hand side. So you can approach us afterwards. I can give you the QR code. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. No, yeah. Next slide. Should go down. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, as I said, we were thinking of if we would write the underlying principles afresh. How could that look like if we took sustainable development, human rights, people in nature seriously? So one principle 1 centers on human rights, principle 2 on food security as a very important concept. We see humans as nature. We understand that trade in agriculture is very important, but it must be complementary to local food systems. This is one of the underlying assumptions. We think all over the world, local food systems must be fixed and strengthened, and trade is fine if it's complementary and not replacing sustainable food systems, local food systems. So we'd like to give back policy space to those countries who have not enough policy space, but we also understand that using that policy space can cause harm to others. So by subsidizing, by using tariffs as you do, you should not harm others. So for Switzerland, Europe would harm others at the moment. So we would like to have these structural inequalities which Jane has mentioned redressed. So trade would need to be more about value-added trade, so more market access for value-added products from poor countries, for example. So redress some inequalities and participation. We'd like to build a bridge between Rome and Geneva so people talk to each other. At the moment, trade is discussed in Geneva, food systems in Rome, human rights elsewhere. They don't talk to each other enough. So these are the underlying principles in our draft treaty. Next slide, please. Yeah. And then the substance. So that's a bit legal. But we started, if you take the current system, a bit simplified, it understands government intervention as something distortive. And so you should not have government interventions in food systems unless, and there are plenty of exceptions. And we turned the thing around. We say government interventions are fine, but only. So we start from the understanding that each and every country in this world has an obligation to move towards sustainable food systems. That means agrobiodiversity, this means better labor standards, etc. So every country has a task to comply with. So the Swiss food system, for example, is not sustainable at all. So if you take that obligation, which you can derive from international human rights, biodiversity law, etc., if you put this obligation at the center, we argue if you use trade tools like tariffs and subsidies, is fine if these tools are aligned with that obligation. Also, versus inside, it's an obligation of states to do something against market concentration and do something for fair and stable pricing. So this is on this side of the coin. But there's another side of the coin. We also argue that you can't use tariffs and subsidies the way if it harms others, and not other states, but other vulnerable people elsewhere. So you must think differently if it harms. And you must redress structural inequalities. It's a bit complicated, but it's a system which is not an either or, but something in between system. Next slide, please. We were also thinking of an institutional structure, and we were imagining a world where countries cooperate. It's not the current world, but maybe the future world, I hope so. So we were thinking of more institutional interaction, advisory bodies which help countries, those countries also in need, to help those to get to grips with how can we re-establish local food systems that are diversified, etc., and have fair trade at the same time, to ensure some that here also that human rights people, food system people, trade people, etc., talk to each other. So this is very brief. So next slide, just the last one. What we did not cover, it's very important for food systems, intellectual property, just very marginally covered. Food aid marginally covered, it has been mentioned, would be very important. We did not cover investment, we did not cover financing, we did not cover monetary policies, all very important to rethink, and everybody here in the room and beyond the room is invited to do so. So we were imagining plenty of ideas out there to break up a bit the thinking and break up the stalemate which is happening in agriculture, to think towards a fairer system. Yes, and the last slide now, it's just here you find the links to the websites, LinkedIn, an interview, and if you want to give feedback and comments, if you look at the treaty and have comments, we're still in the consultation phase, please get back to us and give us your insights. So now we will have a discussion. Back to Sophia. I have here some material. We will give, I will distribute this a bit so the discussion might be easier. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. So, you know, not a lot of time, lots of people. We wanted to, I'm going to put Jane, and I'm going to put Josephine, and Facundo. I'm going to put Facundo. I'll put him on the spot. The first thing I want you to do actually is just stop for a minute and think about what, if you were visioning the food system, what would be most important to you? What do you think would be the thing that you would like to hold out as something that would be either an image or a word that for you would be capturing what you imagine by a fairer trade system for agriculture? And I'm just going to ask you to think about it for a minute and then ask you to just tell your neighbor, what is it either that you think would make the system fairer? Just as a chance to break up the room a little bit and maybe to see what we were doing as well, trying to think this through. Je ne sais pas si vous avez tout à fait suivi, mais je vous demande d'envisionner un petit peu qu'est-ce qui vous semble le plus important d'un système alimentaire qui est plus juste, plus soutenable, plus viable. Et après une minute, de partager ça avec votre voisin. All right, I'm going to bring us slowly back. I'm glad there was some discussion. Je vais gentiment vous rappeler à la salle. And we'll start. I'm glad there's a lot to say and there's so much knowledge in the room. Jane, I'm turning to you. These are just some quick reflections from Jane, Josephine, and Facundo, and then we'll take questions and see our time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. For me, really, I was really excited about this project of redesigning, rethinking the agreement on agriculture. From our presentation, me and Josephine, it's clear that the current agricultural rules, trade rules, are not working for the people. They are not working for the planet. So the issue of reimagining, redesigning new rules are very, very critical. And for me, I really support that. And for me, I'm also excited about the principles, you know, because principles are really important as a bedrock of any agreement, any policy, any treaty. So for me, I'm really, you know, I was really excited about those principles. But maybe what we can ask, do we need to add on any other principles or not? Maybe another issue, lastly, is the issue of looking at other trade-related issues in the second to last slide about investment, which is very, very important, those trade-related issues. Investment, intellectual property rights, they also impact on agriculture. But maybe what we need also to look at are the other trade regimes outside the WTO, like the bilaterals. I think they would also be really important. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Josephine.
Okay, one of the points that I could emphasize on her presentations is about property. Yes, she talked about the property, and I think that could also refer to the question that I had previously, and I didn't respond about spirituality. All is not object in the world. Everything is not about objects. It's also about spirits, also about thinking, and like how we are reacting now is like everything is about objects. We can't buy everything. Everything is not. You cannot be just there and fixing price for everything. And it's also related for things like seeds. When you talk about seeds and property now, do you know that for us as farmers, in some case, they are criminalizing local seeds. So it is like you are about to say you are going to have a child and you have to buy your, you have to have the seeds coming from outside. That are some areas of property that we have to look very seriously. Who is owning what? Who is owning what? Why? We are talking about subjects, we are talking about objects. Everything is not objects. And when we are talking about trade, we need also to consider those aspects, because we are humans. We are not all as, you should not consider everything as objects, so we need to respect the dignity of human, even if we are talking about trade. Thank you.
Thank you. And Facundo.
Yes, very briefly, because most has been covered by both Lisa and Sophia regarding the agreement. As Lisa was saying, I think that AOA Reimagine contains a significant part of the agreement is about principles. And I think that something that I like of principles is that they are very well balanced, because sometimes you might get the feeling that some of these principles can enter in contradiction with each other. And I was looking, for example, one of the principles speaks about this idea of sovereignty or state sovereignty, but at the same time is balanced by another principle that is no harm, that I think that comes out quite strongly in the draft. And I think that if there is one key thing that I would stress from this agreement that I think is remarkable, it's Article 5, if I recall correctly. That is basically what you can see there in the screen. That is this idea that this is real change that our draft proposes. This idea of parties having a responsibility to work towards sustainable food systems, because this entails to some extent a change of mind. You don't have just an agreement with obligations and rights, but you have now the responsibility to work towards that. And I think that this partially could have been, I don't know if informed, but influenced by you might recall the ICG Climate Advisory Opinion. It was an advisory opinion, but still not an obligation, carries some legal weight, if we can say, that even if we don't have obligations, we have some sort of duties. Parties have the duty, for example, in that opinion, to prevent significant environmental harm. If we translate this into our draft, is, okay, duty to prevent significant harm. However, we define it, the duty to cooperate. The idea of international cooperation is very present. So if there is one element that I would take of that I think you can then go and check the QR code and check the draft, is go for that, go and see that provision, because I think that that's a real contribution of our exercise, and I'm very proud that we put it there. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And maybe when you get a chance, Danielle, we could go back to the slide that has the code, so people have a chance to see those documents. So it's it's like slide 3 or 4 actually. Yeah. Counterintuitively, there. I think that's the best. I know, but it's the one that's visible. Anyway, okay. Who has questions? I'd be happy to take any questions. You had one already, so let me just see Herbert, and I'm happy to come back. Yeah. Can you pass the mic back? They're all free. Question or comment?
Yes, thank you so much. Just thinking aloud about the relationship. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry, I hadn't done that. My name is Herbert Cafero. I work with SEATINI, and I work with Jen. So I have a question regarding how we can embed some of the emerging issues embedded within the agreement on e-commerce with the agreement on agriculture, because we are talking about agri-tech. And increasingly, there is a relationship. How then can we embed some of those issues? For example, the introduction of GMOs is also embedded within the agreement on e-commerce, because the tech companies in agriculture are introducing, all that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Damien O'Connor. I was former Minister of Trade and Agriculture for New Zealand. The question is whether we think the rules of trade, which are clearly not working for everyone, whether it is the trade rules or indeed the structure of farmers and their systems within the country that is the challenge. In New Zealand, our experience is that 100 years ago, farmers were not able to leverage any returns or guarantees until they formed cooperatives. So the question is whether changing the rules of trade will achieve any progress for African farmers, or whether indeed the formation of cooperatives and leverage is the first thing that should happen to enable them to participate in the world of trade.
Je vais parler en français. Je suis Arnold Puech-Dalissac, je suis le président de l'Organisation mondiale des agriculteurs. Nous sommes la fédération de 82 organisations agricoles sur tous les continents. Pour l'Afrique, c'est l'île Maurice qui est aujourd'hui notre président, et pour l'Asie par exemple c'est le Népal. Donc on a des petits producteurs comme des grands producteurs. Moi je suis agriculteur en France. Ma question est autour des semences, parce que quand je suis né on était 3 milliards d'habitants, maintenant on est 8 et on a multiplié la production agricole par 3 par la génétique des semences, par la génétique animale. Et c'est grâce à un système à la fois libéral et à la fois contraignant, pour que tout ne puisse pas faire de commerce n'importe comment, qu'on a pu développer ce savoir-faire. Et je voudrais comprendre votre point de vue sur les semences, parce que grâce à la génétique, c'est là où on est fort. Hein. Si j'avais gardé les semences de mon grand-père, je ne serais plus agriculteur. Hein. Point.
I think it's very good what you guys did. I had a question for Principle 4 and Principle 7, because I think that's what the African Continental Free Trade Area is trying to organize in terms of requiring agriculture to be founded in international cooperation and governance. I mean, internationally it doesn't work out of regions, but I think in the regionally it works, like in the European Union, when the European Union says no more hunger, and you have food banks and working to make sure that though there's subsidies, but you guys meet up with your thing, but worldwide it doesn't work. But my question really is on the abuse of power, where we've seen, because agriculture is just one aspect of international trade, and sometimes when countries feel threatened, they would use the ammo they have, like we saw with Brazil and the European Union. They make a sweet trade deal where Brazil supplies pig to European Union, and European Union says don't cut down trees, and they say if you don't remove that trade tariffs, we're going to impose something on the pig farming as well. So how does it work when a country is being threatened and they have to use their power to try to balance back international trade?
Hello, I'm Jonas. I work for Umundi. So you know my position on your project, because I wrote a report on it. So thanks for this breakthrough proposal. It's very nice. As Facundo was saying, it's a set of principles. So it's very high level and almost philosophical point of view, and it relies a lot on law and rights, and it's very nice. But I'm wondering in terms of how can we land for countries on somewhere on this set of principle, and I know you are more think tanks NGO, so it's not your role, but I'm wondering how country can take that and land somewhere. Yeah.
Merci pour la parole. Je suis Madame Zé Patricia. J'avais également quelques préoccupations. La première est relative donc au changement climatique qui touche de manière très sévère donc nos petits producteurs. Pour comprendre, pour savoir comment est-ce que c'est possible de les protéger plus que ça, parce qu'ils sont vraiment à la merci des changements climatiques au niveau des petits producteurs africains. Est-ce que les politiques avancent réellement? Est-ce que vous pouvez faire quelque chose vraiment? La deuxième question était portée sur les engrais, l'utilisation des engrais chimiques. Là aussi, ce n'est pas très encadré. Ce n'est pas très encadré dans notre environnement. On se retrouve avec des engrais chimiques de manière anarchique sur le marché. On ne connaît pas toujours l'origine. Voilà, je veux dire, l'origine est souvent douteuse. Et puis, l'utilisation n'est pas encadrée. Et donc, pour finir, ce sont les consommateurs qui sont à la merci. Et donc, vraiment, c'est un vrai problème, l'utilisation contrôlée des engrais chimiques pour nos producteurs africains. Comment contrôler ce marché? Comment vraiment avoir accès à des engrais, comme je dis, contrôlés? Comment avoir la compétence même, j'ai envie de dire, des experts en la matière? Vraiment, j'ai envie de dire, c'est en friche complètement, et vous comprenez que
on est vraiment pas à l'abri. La troisième question, c'est sur les prix. C'est sur les prix. Il ne vous a pas échappé qu'en ce moment, le cacao qui était vendu l'année dernière par les petits producteurs camerounais à 5 000 francs le kilogramme, et aujourd'hui on est à moins de 1 000 francs CFA. Je ne sais pas, ça correspond à combien d'euros là? C'est peut-être 1 euro finalement. 1 euro aujourd'hui, le kilogramme, alors qu'il y a 1 an seulement, il y a 12 mois, on était à 5 000 francs, ça correspond à combien? À 10 euros. Oui, ça fait quand même une baisse drastique. Et bien entendu, c'est qu'ils subissent certainement les aléas des cours mondiaux et de tout ce qu'il y a. Comment faire pour protéger? Parce qu'en réalité, ma question est sur la protection des producteurs africains qui sont réellement à la merci, et comment faire. Voilà mes préoccupations. Merci.
Yeah, last question behind, thanks. And yeah, short.
Well, thank you once more. My question is concern agriculture or crop cultivation and environmental protection. We all know about the European regulation in 2023 that prohibit the importation of any crop that result from any deforested land. So us maybe African or who to maybe to undertake a particular or to cultivate a particular crop, at least we must at least have a minimum of deforestation. For example, cocoa cultivation. So is this regulation a form of a sort of a disguised protectionism, or it is really for the protection of the environment? So we are like confused on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you a lot for all these questions. There have been, we tend to simplify a bit as lawyers, so think in black and white because you have to draw the line somewhere. When we talked about every country or region has an obligation, responsibility to move towards sustainable food systems, we have defined this in the annex, what we mean by that. And it refers a bit to many of much you have been asking. So we argue kind of a bit in simplified terms. Out there we have an agro-industrial system, which comes with many problems. And we have a totally different way of doing agriculture, which is more diversified, or should be diversified, more based on traditional knowledge, more, it's just an other way of doing agriculture. And we understand that responsibility. So if you're facing both systems, to make sure that first this system, the agro-industrial system, does not trump the other, that the state ensures that this system has enough space. So it's we were also discussing the term sanctuaries, or leave enough space to that what you mentioned basically, Josephine. So have a governance scheme for that system here, and make sure that the agro-industrial system is improved. There is a lot of ideas out there of how you can better structure, less uniform, how you can improve and make agro-industrial system less input intensive, etc. And then also in trade to make sure that that system remains protected. And that refers to what has been asked with regard to cooperatives. Of course, it would be the responsibility to promote cooperative. It would be a responsibility if you use GMOs to do so in a very safe way. If e-commerce, you use that in order to allow for that system to drive as well. So that is what we were looking for a bit. With regard to cocoa pricing, the volatility, we have included responsibility also for consumer countries to ensure fair pricing and stable pricing. So to come back to price policies, but in a different way. And there are some interesting regulation on the table in France and EU, for example, now to ensure fairer prices. Much needs to be done there, I agree. With regard to the EUDR, the EU deforestation regulation, which you've mentioned, it's a bit a different approach. We basically argue you should foster markets of value-added products from your country. If you say we don't want products which are linked to deforestation, you have to give something else. You know, that is how we would argue, and also how we would argue is that if the EUDR, EU deforestation regulation, comes with new services, traceability services, and we have a project in Ethiopia to make sure that these traceability services are located in the producer countries and not in the consumer countries, so that the value addition takes place in the producer countries and not in the consumer countries. You understand that bit? Maybe it's a nice tool if it's done in a sensible, good way, so that you can foster. In Ethiopia, we have seen that the forestry department, for example, very much likes the EUDR because it empowers the forestry department. So the picture is more it's a bit more heterogeneous. Yeah. Maybe you.
I mean, I think we're at time. I might say two things. One is I think that although we had an enormous expansion in the productivity of our agriculture in the last 80 years, we've had an enormous amount of harm as well. That means our children have a much foreclosed possibility of that kind of thing. We'll have other possibilities and other imaginations, but we won't have the aquifer that we've drained in the Oglala. We won't have the climate space. We're on an unstoppable bend now. We can bend that arc, but we can't stop climate change. We've lost a lot of biodiversity, although we have a lot of initiatives to protect it. So I think we have to be, without disrespecting what happened, we have to understand where we are now, and some of these places where we still have a diversified agriculture, how do we protect it and expand its potential? And the last thing I want to say is just that part of what this is for me is about food from somewhere. So a lot of our trade relationship has been about erasing where the food comes from, erasing what makes it specific, and there's been a lot of pushback from that. And I think that if we have trade from somewhere, we do what a lot of the fair trade movement was about, and we start to see each other. The EUDR has potential, although I wouldn't say it's arrived. Yeah, so just leave you with those thoughts, and I would be happy to talk about any of the things that came up actually, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming.